And welcome to An Hour with the Candidates on LPTV, a production of the Libertarian Party and Libertarian National Committee. Joe Bishop, Henchman, Chairman, and of course, as always, John Gapso on the big board. My name is Pat Ford, and I'm Chairman, the proud Chairman of the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island. As always, there's a few purposes for these shows. We want to give the Libertarian community an opportunity to meet our wonderful down-ballot candidates. Our down-ballot candidates are the soul, the future, and quite honestly, the present of the libertarian philosophy in this nation and at large. We've got elected libertarians now in virtually every level of local and municipal office. We've got mayors, town council people, selectmen. We've got folks on different boards, community organizations, and in doing so, they are the front line of delivering the libertarian philosophy to community residents around the nation. We like to take this opportunity to challenge our down-ballot candidates into delivering what we call here lunch pail issues. Bill Clinton, I think, once referred to it as it's the economy, stupid. Lunch pail issues through the vision and the prism of a libertarian philosophy. Many of us are economics junkies, wonks. It's all very important. And it's very important for us to understand how our statement of principles is incorporated with economics and the law. But particularly in these troubled times, the average American, well, a lot of these folks are just concerned with survival. Resources, ultimately one day given in a purely voluntary method, pooled for the betterment of a community, but a voluntary community. Finally, as always, we like to say we want libertarians, big L, small L libertarians, to understand the challenges and the importance of these candidates across the nation. In about the year that we've been broadcasting, I think we've done a great job of getting folks in Maine to realize the importance of someone who's running to be mayor in Hood, Texas. For someone in California to understand why ballot access is so very, very important in New York State. Someone in Massachusetts to see the challenges faced in a state like Florida. And of course, a Floridian understanding what fusion politics are all about in New York. In doing so, we bring us together and provide a sense of community and provide a support structure for our candidates nationally. Joining us tonight, of course, is someone who's an alumni of the show, as we now like to call them, an alumni and a repeat offender. Sasha Cohen joined us in the very early days of the show when we were in sort of a soft opening. We were broadcasting largely on the LPTV page. He ran for office. He was an important volunteer around the nation, doing everything from sign waving to telephones to petition drives. I had the opportunity to work closely with him during that final petition drive here in Rhode Island. I consider him a great libertarian and a great friend. Sasha, welcome back to Candidates Corner, an hour with the candidates.
Thank you so much for having me, Pat. It's great to be back.
Well, a lot's transpired since you appeared on this show the first time. Let's start sort of at the very beginning. Tell us about that election, and then just tell us about your activities campaigning alongside folks like Spike Cohen and Joe Jorgensen.
Sure. So the November election came and went, and I came out of it with 24% of the vote.
Right.
You know, I didn't necessarily expect to win, but I expected to perform, far better than libertarians traditionally have in Dekalb County. And it's very rare for us to get somebody on the ballot out there. And what I was really able to do, and what I'm the most proud of, is start organizing around issues with people. I spoke with members of Sunrise Dekalb, which is an environmental advocacy group from the left, the Dekalb Tenants Association, and even our local chapter of the DSA. And from within those groups, I came in and I talked about how much I cared about the issues that they cared about. And we recognized that even though some of our solutions are different, a lot of us really can respect and work with each other. And so building those bridges, making those connections, and earning a lot of their support was something super meaningful that came out of the November cycle. And it's what's given me the ability to move forward and run in this upcoming election.
Now, you were, again, very active simultaneously. And by the way, congratulations on a great showing.
Thank you.
And folks who are new to the movement understand that the challenges we face, the obstacles placed in our path, the burdens we must carry are, on a political sense, almost biblical. To do so is to, in many cases, in many parts of the country, introduce the philosophy, the concept, and promote an understanding of what a libertarian is in the first place. Because there are still, despite noble efforts by now, generations of libertarians, there are still folks who are, well, a little confused and need to be sorted out a little bit. And we've all got to, at one point or another, had to overcome that notion that, no, I'm not a Republican. I'm not a liberty Republican. I'm not controlled opposition. I am a libertarian. And explain to folks what that meant. How much was that a factor? You've got some great people running statewide, and there's a great libertarian tradition in Illinois, but how much was that still a factor for you?
Oh, I think that was the single most difficult aspect of running, was explaining, no, I'm not Rand Paul. I don't like Rand Paul. He doesn't speak for me or the movement. You know, there's been such a long trend of American pop culture viewing libertarians as this sort of wish.com republicanism, and disabusing people of that notion was the first step to really talk about the issues that mattered to me. Because before they were even willing to listen to that, they had to recognize that I wasn't from the same political wing as some of the more popular figures that get characterized as representatives of the liberty movement.
What are the single biggest issues now? Because I'm bringing this up because you've also campaigned simultaneously on a national level. Where were the biggest single sources of confusion for people in terms of, let's just say, whether it be issues from our statement of principles or sort of day-to-day lunch pail issues?
I think economic freedom and things like labor and labor rights. You know, a lot of people view libertarianism as a very right-wing ideology, and sort of breaking that connection and saying that, no, I'm a libertarian because I believe the state should not intervene in union building and in labor organizing. And I don't believe that the state should prevent people from forming co-ops and forming communes and organizing outside of the traditional American corporate system. And once I talked about economic freedom in terms of the ability to step outside our current system, people really started listening.
Which individual policy issues stood out to folks from Illinois and around the country? Is it our anti-war stance? Is it the fact that we're opposed to corporate cronyism? Is it, in terms of the real, say, day-to-day issues, what did folks get caught up by?
I think issues of policing were really on the forefront of everybody's minds. And so I fielded a lot of questions because most people naturally assumed that Democrats would be leading the way on police and police reform policies. And the reality is that the libertarian movement has stood for a level of personal freedom independent of the state since its inception. I talked about the need for body cameras. I talked about the need to end qualified immunity and the need to, most importantly, end the drug war, seeing as the drug war is one of the biggest drivers of interactions between community members and police. And I didn't necessarily approach it from a pragmatic standpoint of saying these are all of the reforms that we want. I was very radical and open in my messaging. I am a police abolitionist. I am a prison abolitionist. Mm-hmm. And while I do accept that we need to make these big reforms and will push for them, I kept at the forefront that I'm talking about a radical reorganization of how we deal with the ideas of crime and punishment in this country.
Did that shock people? You know, it's folks in the hinterlands, and I live in the hinterlands because the hinterlands can be everywhere, often have this sort of disembodied take to abolishing police departments, to that type of radical, I won't even call it reform, reimagining, if you will, reinvention of how we shall just basically interact as a society. That's sort of a voice from afar that you see on talking head shows. When they're confronted with a candidate or someone working on behalf of a national candidate, how do folks typically react to that?
They tend to go one of two ways. And I actually had a meeting this week where I got to see both happen at once. I sat down with another candidate for local office to talk policy and talk strategy and just get a better feel for each other. And I mentioned offhand that I consider myself a police abolitionist. And his eyes went real wide as if he couldn't quite wrap his head around the idea that somebody believed that. And from the back of the coffee shop, the employee yelled, "Hell yeah, brother." And those are kind of the two reactions that I've been getting. I think a year or two ago, there wasn't as much of an appetite for open discussion of the idea of abolition. But
Right.
with everything that's happened, people are recognizing that reformist approaches are not enough. And a lot of people are starting to ask the question, will reform-based approaches ever be enough? And so I think it's important that we represent the idea that no, they might not be, and there is another way.
Isn't that true though of so many issues? We all develop, and you're a polished candidate now. You've got stump speeches. You speak to crowds. You work with small groups of people as a candidate. You all develop your own terminology for it. I always say that incrementalism is the devil, and people go, "What do you mean by that?" And I often use the example here in Rhode Island, which was one of the earlier states, not the first, but the earlier states to adopt medical cannabis. And underlying thought by so many reformers, so many well-intentioned reformers, was let's take this a step at a time. Let's get cannabis, medical cannabis, an accepted part of Rhode Island's world, if you will, and then people will adapt more easily to recreational. Well, two things happened that completely contravened that. Number one, economic forces took over medical cannabis, and realizing they've got a lock in the market, are some of the biggest opponents to recreational. And yet at the same time, the normalization within so many families of the use of a variety of THC products, not just to smoke for entertainment, but clearly used in a medicinal environment for anyone of a number of reasons, was not enough to overcome that statist belief that we don't mind if you power chug a bottle of bourbon, but let me not get you smoking some weed, boy.
Yeah,
that still exists. What do you think that applies to a lot of issues?
I think it depends on how the issue is framed and how the issue is sold to the public when policy discussions are happening. So a lot of people that pushed for medical cannabis tried to make the public face of it, this is just medical cannabis, without talking about this is a step towards a goal. And so when you do incremental reforms like that, you tend to trip yourself up when it comes to taking the next step. But I do believe that we can put incremental reforms in place, provided we always and unapologetically continue to strive for and talk about our eventual goal. And we had an interesting thing here in Illinois with cannabis, because first we got our medical bill passed. That was House Bill 1. And we got through to recreational 4 or 5 years later. But the reality was, in the time it took to get to recreational, the state had learned just how it could tax, just how it could regulate effectively. And so by the time we got to full rec, it's now $1 million to get your license, and the taxes are so high that nobody wants to shop at the legally provided outlets. And so the black market continues and it thrives, and the it just hasn't done what one would have hoped for it to.
Right. Now, you use a very important term, unapologetic. In your experience as a candidate and someone advocating on behalf of candidates, has mincing words or just sort of, well, let's just say when it comes to some of the challenging social issues that we are confronted with every day as libertarians, if doing the habita, or the mincing words or the, saying under your breath, yeah, I'm not a big fan of borders. Yeah, all of that. Has that ever worked anywhere?
No, I really just don't believe that it has, and I don't believe that it can. The American voter is not dumb. They don't not understand what you're getting at. But if you simply say what you actually believe and you say it proudly and vocally, and like I said, unapologetically, people will respect that more than any other method of conveying your message. We have a lot of candidates locally, and it's been really amazing seeing both your standard Democratic establishment and some of your most outspoken Trump supporters in town coalescing around the same candidate. And the reason they do that is because that candidate speaks their mind and says what they mean. And even if they don't necessarily agree with them, they respect that. And so I think that's the most important thing we can do to gain people's trust, is be honest about what we're striving for.
And my experience has been, I'd love your reflection on this, when you stick to the, if you will, for the statement of principles, and you stick to our platform, and you're proud and loud about it, you will find people in an audience that some will react negatively. It's not within their worldview to see things in the same manner that we do. And that's, it always goes back, as I mentioned, to Larry Sharp's way of having a conversation with someone, not having to win an argument. And you can plant a seed there. But I'm convinced, having seen it firsthand, that there is also a certain percentage of people who will not only be interested, who will be excited, who will not feel a sense of confusion, but will be ennobled and empowered by our message. And isn't that who we should be reaching out to right now, to those folks who are, they're out there, who all of a sudden, someone like yourself, who's very articulate, can coalesce into words that which they've been seeking along. And isn't that ultimately what we should be working towards right now?
Absolutely. I think the reality is that a party the size of ours will not be incredibly successful until we have a much larger base of volunteers. And so the primary goal of our campaigns, when we're running for offices that are genuinely out of reach, like the presidency or offices like that, should be to run an unapologetically libertarian campaign that excites people enough to bring them in to their county affiliate, to bring them in to want to spread the message of liberty. Because my voice alone is not loud enough to spread the message of liberty in DeKalb County. But if I can express these ideas, articulate them, and bring 4 or 5 people into the movement that get so excited that they want to go canvass and they want to phone bank and they want to do these things for liberty, then we can multiply each of our impact. And that's why I think having a radical libertarian message is so important.
Well, yeah. We've all been in positions where we just see, as we're looking amongst a crowd, that you see that one person who, again, has never seen a libertarian, never heard a libertarian, never had a conversation with a libertarian, particularly someone like ourselves and so many of the people listening and watching right now who, I'll be honest with you, have a touch of evangelical in them. You're preaching individual power directly to people who have been starved for so long. And therein lies the beauty of a libertarian campaign. For everyone who says, well, we should only run national races, let's not run, that's what we should be focusing on. Or no, we should only run local races. I got to believe that libertarians can walk and chew philosophical gum at the same time. How about you?
Absolutely. I think the reality is we run the presidential race because we need the ballot access and we need to bring more people into the movement. And if we put just enough into the presidential race to maintain that ballot access and bring some more people into the movement and dedicated more effort towards the local race, we could build an effective backbench of libertarian elected officials at the local level. You look at what other state parties within the duopoly have done, like the DFL up in Minnesota. They have such a heavy backbench of elected officials that are articulate, passionate, really drive people's interest, that if somebody gets caught up in a scandal, they can just have them resign because there's another person ready to pop up and take their place the very next day. And we need to build that strong backbench. And we have some fantastic people that are working on that within the party. Apollo Pizzell and the Libertarian Frontier Project, not just our first state house member over in Wyoming. If we can see things like that continue to happen, I think the numbers there in terms of state house membership is there's 8 Democrats and 1 Libertarian, and then just an overwhelming number of Republicans. But if we can pick up 3 or 4 more seats there, which is a viable goal for 2022, we could be on the level of the Democrats as the opposition party, not the third party, not the left behind party, but the opposition party. And from there, the sky's the limit.
Absolutely. Well, now you're running again. You have, after spending time again on your own campaign in Illinois and then investing a lot of time with folks on the trail. And again, thank you for your help in Rhode Island. You're back on the trail. Tell us about your latest venture, what you're running for now, and also give us a little smattering of the new approach you've taken to running, which has a chance to be very successful. Tell us about that.
Sure. So when my county board race finished up, I sort of immediately knew that I wanted to stay active and involved, but I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. And I knew the city elections were coming up. And I started thinking, well, maybe I'll go for one of the city offices or maybe for township. But I saw a news article that really sort of stuck in me and ticked me off. And it was that the city of Dekalb decided they were going to create a special service area around basically a single square block of the town and add $100,000 in property taxes as retribution for a landlord that had some poor living conditions. And so I'm reading this thinking, oh, they're going to jack the property taxes. That's not a good thing. Are they at least going to do something to improve the community that they're taking the extra taxes from? No, they're going to put it towards increased policing in what's already the most over-policed neighborhood in my city. So I started talking to some of the other activists in town, the people from Sunrise and the Tenants Association and the DSA and various other activists. And we all came together. We all went to the city council meeting that they were going to vote on that. And I watched as 6 or 7 very passionate, very knowledgeable people got up and explained based on their own personal experience, based on the evidence, why this tax increase would not be a good thing for the community. And then I watched as the city council passed the tax increase 7-1 without even really considering what we had said. A single alderman, as a throwaway comment, said, well, we could work on fixing up some of the outside of the property. Maybe we can beautify the dumpsters with some of that money. And when I heard an elected official suggest they use the new $100,000 in government theft they were going to take to beautify the dumpsters outside rather than actually improve the community, I knew that the only way we were going to get real change in our city is if people dedicated to real change took up the mantle of running for these positions. So I decided to go for city clerk, and I took a really kind of interesting approach with it. I reached out to some of my colleagues and friends from the left in Dekalb, and they were all incredibly on board. They and I get along very well, and they said, of course, we'll help you carry petitions, we'll help you fill your paperwork out. You can get endorsements from some of us, and we want to make sure that we get you in there. And so they went to work. I mean, I had one of the now former chair of our county Democratic Party collected 120 signatures for me for this race. And at the same time, they didn't go searching internally for a Dem candidate to run. And so when everything shook out, I turned in my paperwork on the last day to turn everything in, and nobody else filed.
No.
And
like I said, that's a unique way to approach the challenge of running as a libertarian.
Yeah. So I was shocked. You know, I knew as a nonpartisan race, it wasn't going to be as, you know, the two parties feeling obligated to run someone, but traditionally there's sort of a right-leaning candidate and a left-leaning candidate. But this time it worked out in that way. And I was really happy to do it. And now as we're coming down, you know, we're 39 days away from the election now. And I do have a write-in opponent. At sort of the last second in near the beginning of this month, a write-in candidate announced. That candidate is actually a member of the city staff, which I found a little surprising. You know, the primary role of the city clerk in Dekalb is to apply the city seal to permits that are being issued by the city manager's office. Mm-hmm. So I see that as sort of your transparency backstop, the person who makes sure that the city manager's office has crossed their T's and dotted their I's and everything going on is being done properly. So the idea that somebody who works directly under the city manager should be that check just seems a little ridiculous to me.
Oh, absolutely. And I think back to Dan Fishman's great candidacy to be the auditor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And he very effectively pointed out, in doing so, grabbed the endorsement from the Boston Globe of being, if you will, the umpire, of being the person who is going to essentially be the referee between the two respective quote unquote, well, we won't use that term. Let's just say the duopoly and also the governmental structure in of itself. It's a critically important position. I often refer to, and we talked about this off show, that the clerk is the individual who knows where the bodies are buried. We have something in Rhode Island that we call APRA, which is the Access to Public Records Act, which is sort of like a Rhode Island local version of FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. And very often in municipalities, the clerk will be the person who processes those, or occasionally tries not to process those, and or will redact them and provide every imaginable obstacle, once again, to good government types, or in our case, no government types, to give us the information we need to know as to how, as we say in Rhode Island, the sausage was made. How important is county politics in Illinois? Because each state has its own. Rhode Island's so small, we don't have the counties don't really matter. Right. It's city and statewide. But in Illinois, how important is county government, and what type of areas are they likely to be involved in?
So a big issue that we have locally is access to safe, affordable, and clean housing. And we have a landlord conglomerate that really doesn't provide safe or clean housing. It's affordable, but it's not safe or clean. And the city and the county spend most of their time sort of punting back and forth on the idea of whose responsibility is it to take care of this. So you get into a level of jurisdictional issues when it comes to issues of housing and other sort of zoning regulations. We're actually having a ballot referendum with our April municipals on the subject of legalizing backyard chickens for people to raise. Something I didn't even realize was illegal. It's just truly ridiculous to me that in a town that is known for our corn, it's Dekalb corn. Like 60% of the feed corn in America is Dekalb corn. It's an old farming town that has a college now, and we're so proud of this farming background. We even have Dekalb Corn Fest every year. And yet the city prohibits you from keeping a chicken in a coop in your backyard to provide eggs for your family. It was just ridiculous to me to find this out. And now we're actually going through the motions of having a full citywide referendum on whether or not people should be allowed to keep chickens. And then, of course, if we do legalize it, the city is going to try and slap in permits and regulations and fees and inspections. And it's just going to be a whole big thing where the libertarian solution is, why are we even having this conversation? It's your property. Have your chickens. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the level of insanity, the sheer desire of government to insert itself into the daily behaviors of the many is bizarre. So,
absolutely.
What's your, I mean, do you have an anticipated vote count? It's interesting because writing candidates can be very difficult. A lot depends on the laws in an individual jurisdiction. Is this person mobilized? Was this kind of a rut row? I can't believe no one. I thought, it's kind of like the center fielder and the right fielder sort of watching each other and watching the ball drop in between the two of them because either thought the other was going to get it. Is that what's happened in a position in this race?
My best estimation is yes. The folks that would rather see our government stay a little less transparent had a panic moment and managed to put forth a candidate. I think the average vote total in our city election is somewhere around 2,800 to 3,200, under 10%, as municipals usually are. And we've had write-in candidates do fairly successfully. So I'm certainly going to be doing all I can to run a strong race. I'm currently fundraising to make sure I can get some yard signs out in front of all the polling places. I'm planning to do a round of door hangers. Actually, I'm planning to do a little joint sort of electoral slate of door hangers. Vote for Sasha and vote for chickens. Best running mate I've ever had.
Have you considered adopting a chicken as your running mate?
We did consider doing a little publicity stunt of going out downtown with just stacks of chicks and giving them out to people to make a point. But we'll wait until after the referendum passes on that one.
Right. Have you considered toothbrushes with your pet chickens that you're giving out? Just asking for a friend.
Yes, for a friend.
Absolutely. Well, again, we always want to give the candidate an opportunity to engage in shameless self-promotion I know you've got a brand new website is up. But it's interesting because in a very real sense, real libertarians could hear, well, you're only running against a write-in candidate. You've got an opportunity to be part of, if you will, the ruling body of a county in Illinois. Again, you've got an opportunity here to be living proof of concept, if you will, to the Libertarian Statement of Principles in how you coalesce with, march alongside with members of the Dekalb community as a Libertarian. I would imagine, have other Libertarians been elected in your county before?
Never. I was the first Libertarian candidate to make the ballot in Dekalb County that anybody in the county clerk's office could remember when I did it last year. And I was the first third-party candidate of any party since a Green managed to slip onto a ballot in like 2004.
Right.
So we're seeing really, really great things start to happen. And we think we can turn that into more things. Next cycle in 2022, because of redistricting, all 24 county board seats are going to be up. And so there's going to be spots where we think as a county party, we can get people elected. And having a currently elected city official ready to make endorsements and campaign with those candidates will put us in a lot better position towards getting those partisan elected offices.
So you are the toehold then. You are the first person across the line. And again, as folks will hear me, I'm pretty repetitive of this, but to me, it's one of the most important points of this show and why we do this. The opportunity to put in an individual to espouse libertarian philosophies, but more importantly, again, we don't use that G word. The governed word's a bad word here. To steward, to display this sense of libertarian stewardship over shared community assets. All right, as they are voluntarily accorded any one of a number of individual efforts that the community has decided will improve the life of the community.
Absolutely. I just saw a great question
priceless.
pop up on the screen. Somebody in the comments was asking if I'd heard of Fair Vote Illinois. And actually, the answer is yes, I have. Fair Vote is a fantastic organization that is working to try and get ranked choice voting passed statewide. And one of the really interesting things about the city clerk's position is in Illinois, they are the local election official. And so as a home rule municipality, Dekalb is able to change how they conduct their municipal elections. And I have 3 campaign promises. I want to be transparent and honest with the people. I want to self-term limit. I don't intend to serve more than 3 terms. And I want to make Dekalb move to ranked choice voting. And that is something that we can successfully do if we have a city clerk who's focused on getting it done. And if we can make one of the larger cities in Illinois move to ranked choice voting and show that it can be done, that it can be successful, and that it can increase participation, it'll make it easier for other cities to do it and for the state at large to make that movement. So Fair Vote Illinois is a great group, and I'm already starting to talk to them about what we can do for Dekalb once I'm in office.
Fantastic. Tell us about your websites. How can folks donate, support, remotely page? By the way, just, I had the opportunity to interact with as you know, with the folks who are running the Joe Jorgensen campaign. And Jackie, our good friend from New Hampshire, was able to get monster work done because of the newer technology in terms of paging, and that type of direct contact, texting people with events, texting people with ideas, texting people with get out the vote efforts, proved under her tutelage and under her stewardship to be a phenomenal way of reaching voters. Are you going to be doing anything like that in Illinois in the upcoming 2022s? To me, that's a perfect example of how folks remotely can get involved with candidates based on a time available basis.
Absolutely. I think P2P texting through platforms like Hustle and Call Hub and a few others are really going to be the future of campaigning. Phone banking becomes less and less effective as more and more millennials and now Zoomers reach voting age. Those are folks that don't answer their phones. And if they do, aren't necessarily going to hear you out about a political candidate. But text messages still have a read rate over 95%. When we send out these mass texts and we have people there ready to follow up, respond to them, and answer questions, we can reach a lot more people in a lot less time from further and further away. And so our ability to zoom in on these races all over the country is just so improved. During the 2020 cycle, I helped a little bit on races in Illinois, in Texas, in Nebraska, and I want to say another state, and the state is actually escaping me. And that's just how we're able to do things now. We're so interconnected, and that ability to directly reach out to people makes it so much easier to help.
Excellent. So give us the websites and where folks can watch from afar and hopefully either pitch in. Again, we say this every week. We know folks financially are more challenged than ever. It's been a long, brutal year for a lot of families, a lot of individuals in the libertarian movement. So there's a tendency for all of us to, keep chipping into each other's election efforts, keep volunteering. We just ask people to do the best they can when they can. We're libertarians. We let you make your own decisions decisions on that. But if they've got the hankering to make sure that you get over that finish line successfully, and we're having a little bit of a celebration in a few weeks here, actually a lot of a celebration, how can folks reach out to you?
Sure. So if you check out my website, I'm at sasha4dekalb.com. It's right there on your screen. There are donate buttons slapped all over that website. And, I just want to make a quick appeal to that. I think when somebody hears only person on the ballot, just a write-in candidate, there's a tendency to think, oh, what do they really need to raise money for? And I think the reality is that here we have a golden opportunity with just a little bit of funds put in, just enough to do a round of yard signs and a couple hundred door hangers to the most likely voters. We can almost certainly cement a win. And that is such a rarity in our movement. Not just that we have somebody who is close to winning, but is odds-on favored to get something, that it's so important that we make that last push over the finish line, get it done, and then I can be a voice to help elect other libertarians all around the state.
Excellent. Well, again, Sasha, as a proud member of the class of 2020 here at an hour with the candidates / candidates corner, and now as a member of the class of 2021, we congratulate your continual efforts, not on behalf of your own candidacies, but the selflessness that you and so many other people do, but you're here tonight, and that you've exhibited towards supporting other candidates, whether they be on a national or local level. We understand that not everyone can maintain that type of activity. It's not just a job. It's not just a volunteer effort. It's actually a lifestyle. I've been in the field of battle along Sasha a couple times right now. And it's not just a job, right? And it's adventure. But for those that can, like yourself, and those have not only can but have, my hat's off to you. Congratulations on your efforts, and wishing you, as always, nothing but the best. And of course, after the election, we want to hear from you, some of your experiences, and give us the hopefully that success statement. This is the place where we dream of libertarians coming to spike that proverbial football, Rob Gronkowski style. All right. We want the big spike. We want the celebration. Final thought for tonight, because your victory and your efforts and the successes that you enjoy need to be shared. There are a lot of people who have worked out in the field for years, and it's hard. It's really, really hard. And people give themselves in this movement constantly. When we have victories, we need to take a moment and we need to celebrate them. We need to embrace them. We need to study them, relish them, and then use them as energy to take on the next 20 battles. It's that important to us. And, let's have that conversation in a couple of weeks. All right, buddy?
Absolutely. Looking forward to it, Pat.
All right. Folks, you've been listening to An Hour with the Candidates, aka Candidates Corners, on LPTV, Libertarian Party Television, an effort of the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian National Committee. Joe Bishop Henchman, chairman. As always, a big thanks to John Gapso on the big board. He's the one that brings you the graphics and the links and the background and perspective, and he's a volunteer here, and I owe him a great deal of gratitude, because without his work, we simply wouldn't have this show. Folks, let's get out there again this week. It's been a long, hard winter for a lot of us, but live a libertarian life, be that libertarian example, be that libertarian steward. Take energy from candidates like Sasha, and the week before it was Ashley. Next week, next Friday, we've got a couple of things lined up. It'll probably be at a later time schedule because of some efforts that Martha Bueno and the folks down in Florida are going to be sharing with you on LPTV. But we're approaching springtime. It's time to get to work. I'll see you next Friday night. Thanks again. Have a wonderful week.